Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. My name is Lauren and I am Austin's mom. We are going to be doing a little bit of a different video today. I've realized that with more kids that I've had, I'm kind of forgetting Austin's birth story and my other kids' birth stories as well. I am a mom of 3 boys, Austin, who's 4, almost 5, Hunter, who's 2, and Chase, we call him CT, who is 7 months right now. So with the more kids that I'm having, I'm realizing that I'm forgetting my birth stories. And so I wanted to document just a little bit about Austin's birth story and how he came into this world before I completely forget what happened. So a little bit about Austin's birth story. Let's first take it back to the pregnancy. With Austin, I had a pretty good pregnancy. I gained an appropriate amount of weight. I am also a dietitian, so just being kind of aware of the nutrition related to pregnancy, I did have a little bit of that knowledge prior to. We did get pregnant in 2020 to give birth in 2021 when Austin was born. And so taking what happened in 2020 into consideration, that kind of drove us to want to look for different providers that are outside of the hospital. Reason being is because during that time in our area, if the child tested positive, we would have to be separated. And as a mom, and especially as a first-time mom, I just didn't want that. And so we were looking at some alternative providers, and I kind of stumbled across Fort Worth Birthing Center and like that as a different way of giving birth. Where, the birth centers are still kind of closely connected to hospitals. So if anything were to happen, it would just be a quick transfer. And my mom did give birth naturally, unmedicated. And so having that mind frame, she gave birth naturally to all 3 of her children. So that was kind of a drive for me to say, well, I think I could probably do that. And so definitely kind of wanted to explore that route as well, that natural birthing route. And so what I decided to do was check out Fort Worth Birthing Center. I realized that a part of it was covered by my insurance when I was still working at the time. And so we decided to go with them. With Austin's pregnancy, there wasn't a lot that was remarkable. It was just that I didn't even have any kind of morning sickness or anything. With him, I was not interested in meat. There was a little bit of that metallic taste happening. And so that was pretty much the only thing that I can remember about Austin's pregnancy. And then, so it was pretty standard for a little bit. And then towards the end, I started to get an increase in blood pressure. My family does have a history of high blood pressure and high cholesterol. And so, I was keeping that in mind, and I was at that point on a daily aspirin, but it was still kind of getting higher and higher. We're talking about really the cutoff rate, like 135/85 kind of situation. And it would get elevated when I went in for appointments. And I'm thinking that was just because of the stress related to appointments. I don't really think it was because of anything wrong with baby or with me. But even still, those blood pressures did keep coming back slightly elevated, and my midwife was concerned about that causing a problem. And so she did schedule me for an induction on the morning of the 28th of 2021, April 28th, 2021. And I had that appointment the day before. So I believe it was the 27th. I'm pretty sure this was the timeline. It was a couple of years ago now, so I don't really remember, but I'm pretty sure that was the timeline. And I just remember feeling at that point really defeated. I hated the thought of inductions because at this point I had really put in a lot of research into everything, and I had a doula. I kind of went through all the things with the doula. We tried everything. At that point, we also had done we opted into a few cervical checks as well, and sweeping of membranes. And so just knowing that we had tried everything, I did the dates, I did the red raspberry tea, I did curb walking, I did the mile circuit. So I was very aware of what was happening, and I was still coming across this induction in the morning. So the night before just really took a long shower, and I felt very defeated and very upset with what could happen. I was just really nervous about what could happen, especially as a first-time mom. And then it was in the shower that night, I think it was maybe like 10, 11 o'clock, I felt my first contraction. And I thought I was just imagining it, right? Because as a first time mom, you're not really sure what's going on. And so I thought that maybe that was just in my head, but I was like, okay, I'm feeling something, maybe it'll pick up. And it didn't pick up. Nothing happened after that first contraction, but it was just a little one of those like woof, butterflies kind of feeling. And I should also mention that a couple of days before that, I also had a little bit of the mucus plug come out. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it was the mucus plug. But from that point on, there were no signs of labor. And so I was like, okay, let's just go to bed. Let's just see what's going to happen tomorrow with the induction. And let's just hope for the best. So I go to sleep, and in the morning, it was about 6, 7 o'clock, I wake up and there was blood all over me. Not to be a little bit graphic, but it is birth, so it's going to be a little bit. And so there was blood kind of all over me, the bloody show. And I was like, oh, Nick, let's go. It's go time, because if I'm in labor, then I don't have to go for the induction. So I was really, really excited. And I was like, okay, let's go to the birthing center. Like, I'm feeling contractions, because at that point I did. But it wasn't painful. There was nothing painful yet. It was just like, oh, something's there. And then a couple minutes later, oh, there it is again. And so we drove over to the birth center, and the birth center was not open at this point. So we waited outside, and as we were waiting outside, luckily it was, a nice day, but as we were waiting outside, the contractions started to pick up a little bit in intensity. And I remember it starting to get a little bit uncomfortable, kind of like a stomach ache. So I'm thinking, I have a high pain tolerance. So I'm thinking, okay, yes, it's coming soon. Baby should be here. Once they open up the doors, we'll have our baby. And so Valerie, my midwife, opens the door. She checks me, and I'm only at 3 centimeters. And she says, I'm sorry, but we have to send you away. There is a time limit on the amount of time that the birth center could take you in for before they would have to end up transferring you. I think that's the policy. But she didn't want me to be timed out. And so I had to leave the birth center and come back home. So now we are back at home, and at this point the contractions are there. It is, we are in labor, and I am panicking. I, again, have a really high pain tolerance, but for some reason I was like, Nick, I think I need to tap out. I am only at 3 centimeters. There is no way that I'm going to make it to 10. If this is what a 3 feels like, there is no way in hell I'm able to go this far. We have to scratch this plan. We need to go to the hospital. You need to shoot me up. I'm done. I can't do it. And at this point, Nick is like, maybe you should call your doula. Maybe we should call Angela, our doula. So I was like, okay, that's a good idea. So I call Angela. I tell her to come over. And while she's coming over, I jump into the shower. That's usually my safe place. I feel really comfortable in the shower. I did a lot of meditation and hypnobirthing kind of exercises in the tub when I was taking baths. And so I thought that would be a really great place to just try to take it easy and calm down. Angela arrives. I get out of the shower and I sit on the toilet, and I just remember sobbing and telling her, I can't do this. I need to tap out. And she looks at me and she says, you can do it. You're already doing it. And I forget that I'm from New York, so I can do anything, right? And so I don't know what it was, but that pep talk was really helpful. And I was like, you know what? Actually, I can do this. It's okay. This is my body just doing what it's supposed to do. I've trusted my body thus far to get me to this point, and I'm going to trust my body throughout this process. It can't be stronger than me. My contractions cannot be stronger than me because they are me. This is my body doing its own thing. So I need to just trust that I am this powerful and I can handle it. So we go over to the bed, my master bedroom, and I start laboring in there. Angela tells me a really helpful tip where instead of, when you're having your contraction, instead of going high where you go ee and like screaming high, try to do like a guttural noise, like a kind of thing. When you do that, you engage your pelvic muscles a little bit better, and so the contraction is more efficient. And what I found throughout this whole process was, since that pep talk, no joke, the contractions became easier. It just felt more manageable. Even though they were getting more intense, closer together, I was just on top of them. I didn't feel like they were on top of me. I was able to manage it. And I know that a lot of people say like, oh, it's a mental thing, but it really is. That mental load, once you are able to kind of get into your head and say, okay, yes, I can do this, it actually did get a lot easier. So we labored in there for a little bit. I actually dozed off in between contractions. It had been a couple of hours, and at some point Angela tells Nick, my husband, that it might be time to head to the birth center now. The contractions were getting, pretty close together, and I was making, really animal sounds at that point. And so we get in the car, and the birth center from our house to the birth center is maybe a 20-25 minute ride, and it felt like hours. It was so long. I was so uncomfortable. But luckily I didn't have baby in the car. We got to the birth center. I made my way up into the room, and at this point, everyone was getting the equipment ready. I was hearing the bath being drawn for me because I really wanted to experience a water birth. I heard that water was really helpful with labor, and so I'm hearing the water in the background getting ready, and the midwives just kind of taking my blood pressure and realizing that it's kind of high. So there was a little bit of a, we have to get this baby out now kind of situation. From that point, I get put on my back, and we start trying to push for baby to come out. I believe my water had broken at some point in between there, but to be honest, I don't actually remember. But I do know that there was a sense of urgency to get baby out with my blood pressure. And so I was pushing, and with a couple of pushes, baby ended up coming right out, and he was placed on my chest, and I never actually made it to the bath. So, but it was great. And I remember after he was put on my chest, I said, that was awesome. Let's do it again. Let's run it back. And I don't know if that was a birth high thing, but now that I've had 3, I can safely say that I actually do really like giving birth. I love that power that I feel afterwards. I love the connection. It is really... I'm a Christian, but I don't necessarily practice very well. I don't go to church. But that is the closest feeling that I have to God when I'm giving birth. And so it really, there's something very spiritual about it. And so after I gave birth, I was like, yes. And I'm always chasing this high now of having that baby. And so they checked Austin, and everything was perfect. He was great. Actually, I say everything was perfect, but he was a little bit yellow, and he was a little bit underweight. He was 5 pounds, 4 ounces. And I don't even remember the time. It was from the start. I started giving birth. I started having contractions at about 7 in the morning, and then I ended up giving birth at about 1 o'clock. So for a first time mom, that was pretty good, and yeah, and it was so good. And then all I remember after that was Nick picked up some Chick-fil-A for me. So I got a salad and a Diet Coke, and it was still to this day, one of the best meals that I've ever had. I feel like I really worked for that salad. And a couple days later, because his bilirubin was a little bit high, we did end up having to take him to the hospital anyway, just so that he could get a little bit of that suntan and make sure that jaundice kind of came down a little bit. So we were there for maybe like 1 or 2 nights, and yeah. And now he's here, and he's 4, almost 5, and it is still one of the best days ever. I don't use a doula anymore, but I cannot recommend having one enough, especially for that first time mom. Especially if you're a first time mom, I would recommend that so much, because you just don't know what you don't know. And having someone there, even if you have like your mom, right? Because I always say like sometimes like a doula is like a mom, but just with some more information. And the best thing that you can do to have the birth that you want is to educate yourself. I you really cannot walk into the situation blind. I mean, you can, but you probably shouldn't, right? Especially as a minority, mom. I'm aware that the U.S. mortality rate for pregnant women is pretty high. And so just making sure that you're equipping yourself with the knowledge would be really helpful, and definitely something that I would recommend. And once I knew what was going on with labor and where I was, and just had a little bit of knowledge, even during the whole process, I felt much better, much more at peace, and really able to manage my contractions because I knew where I was. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to do that without my doula. So I do recommend having a doula present as part of your care team. But other than that, that's pretty much it for the birth story of Austin. And so if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up and subscribe, because I will probably be posting Hunter's birth story and CT's birth story as well, which were both home births and also magical in their own ways. And so if you're interested, definitely feel free to keep following us for more. All right, bye.